Particles are complicated, but they don't have to be. In this video, I'm going to do an in-depth analysis on all of the most common particles in Japanese. Whether you're new to Japanese or you're a veteran learner, I guarantee you'll learn something from this. The reason why I'm doing this is because a lot of textbooks don't teach particles correctly. A lot of times on YouTube, you'll see all these videos that are like 15 to 20 minutes on a single particle. Particles are hard enough on their own. Accessing the information to explain what they are shouldn't be difficult either. This video isn't meant to be watched start to finish. I mean, if you want to, go ahead. It's more of a reference tool than anything else. That's why I've provided timestamps with the different particles so you can skip around and come back to this video in the future. So sit back, relax, and maybe take some notes as I go over all of the most common particles in Japanese. A particle is a short word or suffix that immediately follows a modified noun, verb, adjective, sentence, or clause. Particles in Japanese, more often than not, can't be translated, and they don't have any inherent meaning. They have meaning based on the words that are attached to. For the first entry, I'm going to be going over wa and ga, and I'm looping these together. The reason for this is because they're often confused with each other, and I want to clear up that confusion. For some reason, textbooks never explain how to use these clearly. To put it simply, wa is a topic marker and ga is a subject marker. Usually textbooks don't do that good of a job at explaining what these are or how they work, and a lot of times they try to translate them as meaning is or am or are. That's not at all what they mean. So let's go over ga first because it's easier to understand. Ga is the subject marker, and it's used in every Japanese sentence, even if you don't see it. Let's take this sentence. Keiki ga oishii desu. This can roughly be translated as cake is delicious. But this does not mean that ga means is. What ga does in this sentence is it marks the subject, keiki, or cake. The verb here actually is built into the adjective oishii. A very early construction that Japanese learners are taught is using the word suki and how to express their like for something. Ichigo ga suki desu. I like strawberries. Neko ga suki desu. I like cats. Anata ga suki desu. I like you. But this one is almost always taught in a way that does not explain exactly what you're saying, and also doesn't explain how the sentence works, which is why I'm going to use this. Ichigo ga suki desu does not mean I like strawberries, because suki is not an adjective, it's a noun. It means something like favorite. So when I say ichigo ga suki desu, I am saying strawberries are liked or favorite. Kind of. There's no direct translation for this. Now that I have ga out of the way, let's talk about wa, the topic marker. The topic is grammatically different from the subject. This one's hard for a lot of English speakers to grasp because in English, the topic isn't used a whole lot. So what is the topic? The topic is what the sentence is being talked about. I like apples. This sentence doesn't have a topic. This has a subject, a verb, and an object. I is the subject, like is the verb, apples is the object. Now, if I were gonna make this sentence including the topic, I would say, as for me, I like apples. The subject in the sentence is still I, but me is the topic, and the as for indicates that I'm the topic. This is kind of how wa works in Japanese. Let's go back to ichigo ga suki desu. If I'm going to expand this sentence to have the topic, I would say, watashi wa ichigo ga suki desu. As for me, strawberries are favorite. Much like in English, you don't need to put the topic in every Japanese sentence, especially in Japanese because it's a context-based language. So if it's implied that the listener knows the topic, you don't need to say it. A lot of beginner Japanese learners are taught that watashi wa roughly means I am. And because of this, a lot of Japanese learners put watashi wa at the beginning of all of their sentences, and you don't need to do this. Stop doing this. It's cumbersome and sounds really unnatural, and Japanese becomes much easier when you don't put watashi wa at the beginning of all your sentences. This isn't to say that you can drop watashi wa from every sentence, just the sentences where watashi wa is implied as a topic. So if I want to say, I'm Freebird, I'm a YouTuber, nice to meet you. What I would say is, 私はフリーバードです。YouTuber です。よろしくお願いします。Notice how I only have 私は in the very first sentence. I don't have it in the second sentence, YouTuber です, because it's implied that the topic of that sentence is me. And in the final sentence, よろしくお願いします. Literally, it means something like, please be good to me. And because of that, the topic is also implied because it's a common introductory greeting. So the wa and ga distinction is incredibly important in Japanese, and it can offend people if you don't use it correctly. Let me tell you a story about why the difference between wa and ga is so important. There was a boy who was learning Japanese, and he had a crush on a Japanese girl, and he wanted to tell her that her eyes were pretty. So he said to her, 目はきれいです. Kirei means pretty, me means eyes. The girl ended up being offended by this, and he didn't understand why. What he should have said is 目がきれいです. The reason being that if you're using wa, you're saying, as for your eyes, they're pretty, which implies that only her eyes are pretty and nothing else about her is. When you say 目がきれいです, the topic of that sentence, あなたは, or you, is implied. As for you, your eyes are pretty, meaning that there are many things about her that are pretty, but her eyes are the most distinct to you. Side note, don't say あなたは when complimenting someone. Watch my video about taboo Japanese and it'll explain it for you. This next particle, o, is very simple. It marks the direct object of a sentence. So when the object of a sentence is being directly acted upon, you use o. Let's take the sentence コーヒーを飲む, drink coffee. We use o here because coffee is the direct object of the verb 飲む, which means to drink. Note how this particle marks when something is the direct object grammatically, not if something is the receiver of an action. If I want to say the coffee was drunk, I would say コーヒーが飲まれた. And I use ga because grammatically, coffee is the subject of the sentence, since 飲まれた is roughly a passive verb. It's not really a passive verb. Japanese doesn't really have a passive form, but for brevity, let's just call it that. Ni is an incredibly important particle that has a lot of different uses, and a lot of people are confused by it. So let's clarify it. The easiest use of ni is with location. In this case, ni represents the location in which something was, is, or is going to. So if I say, I'm going to school, I would say, 学校に行く. 行く is a verb of motion, to go. So that's why I use ni to mark the location in which I'm going. 学校, which is school. You can also use ni to describe the location in which something exists. 図書館にカフェがある. In or at the library, there is a cafe. It usually has a sense of direction and specificity. Say I want to say, I put my textbooks on the desk. I use ni because the location to which I'm placing is the desk. 教科書を机の上に置いた. I placed my textbooks on the top of the desk. Ni can also reference the location on which you physically do something. In English, we would say something like, I wrote in my notebook. But in Japanese, they would say, ノートに書く, which roughly translates to, I wrote on my notebook. The second use of ni is with specific times and dates where something is done or happens. Like if I want to say, I'm going to eat at 6, I would say, 6時に食べる, because 6 o'clock is the specific time when I'm eating. This can be used with dates and holidays too, since they are specific moments in time that you want to pinpoint. Like if I want to say, on May 6th, I'm going to Germany, I would say, 5月6日にドイツに行く. In this sentence, I actually use both the ni for location and the ni for specific time. Ni is marking ドイツ, which means Germany, and that's the location to where I'm going. And ni is also marking 5月6日, which means May 6th. Periods of time, we don't use ni. We use wa sometimes. Now, you don't have to have a particle here. You could just use it without a particle. 今朝は8時に起きました. As for this morning, I woke up at 8 a.m. You don't need to have wa here. You could just say 今朝8時に起きました, and it means the same thing. Notice how this morning, a more vague period of time, doesn't have ni, but 8지, 8 a.m. specifically does have ni. The third use of ni is for the indirect object. So the indirect object of a clause is different from the direct object. The indirect object is someone or something that an action is being done to or for. So let's break it down in English first. In the sentence, Mom bought me a present, the subject, Mom, buys the direct object, present, for me, the indirect object. In Japanese, I would say, お母さんは私にプレゼントを買ってくれた. Mom bought a present for me. This form of ni is often used with くれる and あげる when it's implied that someone did something for you or you did something for someone. If I bought a gift for Mom, I would say お母さんにプレゼントを買ってあげた. Mom being the indirect object in this case. This use sort of can be looked at in a directional way. When you give something to someone, you sort of hand it to them, or you do something in the direction of someone more in a metaphorical way. So it can kind of be considered directional, but that is sort of a roundabout, loopy way of thinking about it. It's just easier to think about it grammatically as the indirect object. In order to explain this next use of ni, I sort of need to talk about verbs a little bit. Passive verbs, in English, are verbs in which the subject is being acted upon. For example, if I want to say, I ate the strawberry, that is an active verb because I, the subject, am doing the eating. But if I want to say, the strawberry was eaten by me, the strawberry is the subject because the strawberry is being acted upon by the verb was eaten, which is a passive verb. So Japanese doesn't have passive verbs. They have a thing called receptive auxiliary verbs, the reru, rareru construction. A lot of times verbs that use this construction are called passive verbs, but that's not the case. It's just a case of textbooks trying to conflate a uniquely Japanese grammatical concept with an English grammatical concept, and it doesn't work. When using the receptive auxiliary verb, you use ni for the agent of the action of that verb. Let's take the sentence, 私が犬に吠えられた. I got barked at by the dog. 吠える means to bark, and 吠えられる means to be barked at. Notice the られる ending. This is a receptive auxiliary verb. The agent of this verb, the thing doing the initial action, the barking, is the dog. That's why we mark inu with ni. Now, this is translated like a passive verb in English, even though it's not a passive verb because in Japanese, receiving technically counts as an action. I, being the subject, is technically doing the action. The thing is, the receptive auxiliary verb doesn't have a translation in English, and because of that, it's often translated as passive, and it's conflated with the passive form, but it's not the same thing. If I want to switch this sentence around and say, the dog barked at me, I would say, 犬が私に吠えた. This just uses 吠える, which means to bark, and the reason why watashi has ni here specifically is because the dog is barking in the direction of me, so this is ni directional. The final common use of ni is with na adjectives. If you put ni next to a na adjective, it turns it into an adverb. Let's talk about na adjectives for a little bit, because na adjectives technically aren't adjectives, they're nouns. They're just called adjectives in English because they're translated like adjectives. The word I said earlier, suki, that is called a na adjective in a lot of Japanese classes and textbooks. The reason why nouns that sort of act and roughly translate to adjectives in English are called na adjectives is because they use the na construction, which I'll talk about later in this video. But if you put ni with a na adjective, it turns it into an adverb. Shizuka na means quiet, but shizuka ni means quietly. 彼女は静かに本を読んでる. She is quietly reading a book. So de is actually a very easy particle when you look at it in a certain way, but it trips up a lot of people because they get it confused with ni. There are only two real uses of de. The first one being utilization, the means by which something is done. 飛行機で東京に行きました. I went to Tokyo by plane. In a literal translation, you wouldn't say by, you would say by means of. Like, I went to Tokyo by means of plane, or I went to Tokyo utilizing a plane. This can also be used with location and time, and when you look at it like this, it completely clears up any confusion between ni and de. For example, 学校にいる means I am at school. Literally, it means I exist at school, but it can roughly be translated as I'm at school. But 学校で勉強する means I study at school. So what's the difference here? In the first one, ni marks where I exist, which is at school. I'm not utilizing the school for existence, I just exist at the school. In the second sentence, the reason why we use de is because 学校 is what is being utilized for study. This also works for time as well, specifically amounts of time. YouTube を3時間で見ました. I watched YouTube for 3 hours. This is kind of like saying I watched YouTube utilizing 3 hours. The other use of de is for limits of time. バイトが17時で終わります. Work ends at 5. I say 17時 here, which means 17 o'clock, but that's because Japan uses US military time. I don't think it's actually US military time, but it's called US military time in America. So instead of 5 o'clock, they say 17 o'clock if they're talking about 5 p.m. instead of 5 a.m. Sometimes de gets confused with the te form of the copula da. By understanding what the te form is and what it does, you can easily discern the difference between de as the te form of the copula and de as the particle. I'm not going to go into the te form because this video is about particles, it's not about verbs. If you want to know what the te form is, maybe I'll make a video on it, I don't know. De can be combined with wa to make dewa, and ni can do this too. The usage of ni and de stays the same, but adding wa makes the clause the topic of the sentence. Let's take this sentence. アメリカには50の州があります. America has 50 states, literally translated as for in America, 50 states exist. アメリカでは銃は合法です. In America, guns are legal. You use de here because America is the location being used for legal guns. It's confusing, but it's how Japanese works. To is another very versatile particle, and it's most commonly used to connect nouns when listing things. Like if I say コーヒーとお茶, it means coffee and tea. And you can keep linking and connecting them together for longer lists. For example, if I want to say, at breakfast, I drank coffee, orange juice, and water, I would say, 朝ごはんはコーヒーとオレンジジュースと水を飲んだ. To can be translated as with as well, sort of similar to the phrase と一緒に, which means together with. 私とコーヒーを飲みませんか? Would you like to drink coffee with me? 一緒に sort of emphasizes the togetherness of an action, like the two agents of the action are doing it together. This nuances the difference between with and together with. So if my friend and I saw a movie together, I would say 友達と一緒に映画を見た. To is also used for conditionals. A conditional is essentially if X, then Y. It does not always follow this format directly, but it's a good rule of thumb. It can be used for things that always, usually, generally, or could happen successively. Note successively, that's very important to this. 食べすぎるとお腹が痛くなる. This can be translated in a couple different ways. If I eat too much, my stomach hurts. When I eat too much, my stomach hurts. When I eat too much, my stomach always hurts. When I eat too much, my stomach usually hurts. If you eat too much, your stomach will hurt. If he, she, or it eats too much, he, she, or its stomach will hurt. There are a couple other ways of showing conditionals in Japanese. A common one is tara. This is when you get the ta form of a verb and you add ra at the end of it. Like in the sentence, 食べすぎたらお腹が痛くなる. But the difference is that tara puts a stronger emphasis on the if factor, asserting its potentiality. If I eat too much, my stomach will hurt. I'm not certain that it's gonna happen, but it could potentially happen, so that's why I'm putting the tara. Another way is by using nara. Nara is used when you're speaking to someone and you don't entirely know if they're going to do an action or not. 出かけるならゴミを捨ててください. If you're going out, please take out the garbage. I don't 100% know if the person I'm talking to is going out. That's why I'm using nara. So using to for this would be strange and unnatural because I would essentially be saying, if this person goes out, then can you please take out the garbage? It's incorrect and weird. The final common use of to is for quotations. This one isn't complicated like the last one. For this one, you just put to at the end of a quotation before a communication verb. お母さんはゴミを出せと言った. Mom told me, take out the garbage. Notice how this isn't the same as saying mom told me to take out the garbage. What I'm saying is that literally the words mom said to me are ゴミを出せ, take out the garbage. What this does is it takes the entire quotation and effectively turns it into a single noun. That's why to is used with the word 思う, to think. バイトを辞めようと思っている. I'm thinking about quitting my job. In this sentence, バイトを辞めよう functions grammatically as a noun. も is actually another topic marker, and the most common use of も is to mean also. YouTuber ですか? 私も YouTuber ですよ. You're a YouTuber? Me too. It can also mean in addition to when it's used with the te form of da. YouTuber でもある. I'm a YouTuber, among many things. This is what is called the inclusive topic. Mo can be used with other particles too, like ni and de, in the forms of nimo and demo. Notice how this demo is different from the other demo that I spoke about because this uses the particle de and not the te form of da. What this does is it makes a phrase using ni or de and turns it into a topic as part of a set. 今朝、スーパーでも買い物していた. This morning, I also went shopping at the supermarket. If you use demo by itself, it can roughly be translated as but or however. でもわからないよ. But I don't understand. Mo has a variety of uses outside of this, but the best way to understand mo in conjunction with other particles is really through memorizing sentences and figuring out what Japanese people actually say instead of trying to translate stuff on your own. I mean, honestly, this is the truth with pretty much all of Japanese. Before we go on to the next particle, let's take a little break. A little intermission. Tea break. Look at this tea that I found. Look at it. It's me. Are you learning right now? Smells really nice. All right, let's try it. Let's get back to the video. Oh my god. The particle ya is for incomplete lists. This one's very easy and straightforward. This entry is going to be super short. バイトではバーガーやフライドポテトを作る. At work, I make things like burgers and fries. The reason why I use ya here is because if I use to, that is an exhaustive list. If I say バーガーとフライドポテト, I'm saying that the only things I make at work are burgers and fries. I make other things that aren't burgers and fries, but the most prominent things that I make are burgers and fries. So that's why I say バーガーやフライドポテト. Ka is the common question marking particle used in formal Japanese. Put it at the end of a sentence and it turns into a question, as simple as that. わかります. I understand. わかりませんか? Do you understand? Ka can be roughly translated as or sometimes. I mean, it's the same use as the question marker ka. So if I want to say ケーキかアイスかどちらが好き? Cake or ice cream, which one do you like? But ケーキか and アイスか sort of function as little mini question sentences. Cake? Ice cream? Which do you like? Toka and nado, I'm going to put together because they're very similar, and I'm putting it right after ka because toka actually isn't its own particle. It's a combination of to and the ka particle. Toka is used for making incomplete lists. So if I want to say at university I studied things like science and medicine, I would say 大学で科学とか医学を勉強した. Science and medicine aren't the only things that I studied in university, but these are sort of, I guess, more relevant to the conversation. That's why you use toka, and you use toka in pairs typically. Nado is used with ya, and it sort of translates to things like or etc. 政治や歴史などの本を読むことが好きです。I like to read books on things like politics and history. No is another particle that has a ton of uses. Most of the uses are extensions of its primary use, which is the possessive. If you want to say something belongs to something or something owns something, then you use no. 彼の犬, his dog. 彼女の家, her house. The other common use is to link two nouns, and this is sort of similar to the possessive. A famous example of this use of no is in the Japanese title for Attack on Titan. So the Japanese title for Attack on Titan is Shingeki no Kyojin. This literally translates to the giant of advance, like advancing as in advancing or charging in battle. But it can loosely be translated as attacking giant. The English title takes some liberties because attacking giant sounds kind of lame in English. It doesn't sound as cool as it does in Japanese. So that's why we say attack on Titan, because it's an exciting title. No is prominently used as a nominalizer, which essentially turns things into nouns grammatically. If I want to say, I like making videos, I could say, 動画を作るのが好き. The final use of no is at the end of a sentence when you're turning it into a question, sort of similar to ka. But no has a more informal, softer tone. If I'm speaking to a friend, I would say no. I wouldn't really say ka. Like I would say, 何を言ったの? What did you say? Instead of 何を言ったか? 何を言ったか sounds a bit more, I guess, rough. Technically, in informal Japanese, you don't even need to have a question marker. You can just say 何を言った? But if you want to have a question marker, no is more soft. No wa is another one of these particles that aren't particles. They're combinations of multiple particles. And these are used to turn a clause into a topic. This is the same use of no that turns something into a noun functionally. どの外学を受験するか決めるのは難しい. It's difficult to decide what college to apply to. The difference between this construction and using ga is that this one implies that applying for college in general is tough, not that it's tough specifically for me. どの大学を受験するのが難しい means that it's specifically hard for me to apply for college, because in this sentence, the topic is 私は. Literally, as for me, it's hard to apply for college. I'm specifically speaking about me. No wa is used for generalities. Noni means something like even though or despite. ビタミン C を飲んだのに病気になった. Even though I took vitamin C, I still got sick. No de and kara, I'm also gonna put in the same entry. Primarily, no de and kara both have the same meaning, and that's because. But kara does have another meaning, which I'll talk about in a bit. マヨネーズが好きじゃないからたこ焼きを食べない. Because I don't like mayonnaise, I don't eat takoyaki. The difference between kara and node is that node is softer. Technically, node is actually a combination of two words, the particle no and the particle de. It's another one of these fusion ones. The other use of kara is as a preposition, and it can mean from. Eki kara itta. I came from the station. You can use this for time as well, and when paired with made, it can sort of mean from blank until blank. 通常8時から17時までバイトをする. I typically work from 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening. Made roughly means until. コンビニまで歩いた. I walked until I reached the convenience store. Or I walked to the convenience store. Made can be combined with ni to make made ni, which references an endpoint in time. 火曜日までに宿題を終わらせてください. Please finish your homework by Tuesday. Shi is another list particle. If I want to say that someone, let's say Takeshi, is cool and fashionable, I could say, Takeshi-san wa oshare dashi kakkoi. Notice how I put shi next to the noun oshare, since it's part of a list. For adjectives, you can just put it at the end of the adjective. Neko-chan wa kawaii shi, mofu mofu da. My cat is cute and fluffy. I can also say, kawaii shi, mofu mofu da shi. Adding this extra shi implies that there is more to it. It adds sort of a sense that there is more to this cat than just the fluffiness. and the cuteness, but those are the two things that stand out to me in the moment. I'm essentially saying, oh my god, my cat, he's cute, he's fluffy, and you know. And I would use this if I'm speaking to someone that already knows that my cat is cute and wonderful and all that. You can use she in the same way with verbs as you can with adjectives and nouns. あいつはタバコを吸うし、お酒を飲むし、マックを食べすぎる. He smokes, drinks, and eats too much McDonald's. You don't have to use she when making list of verbs, but adding she adds emphasis on multiple qualities of a person. That would basically be like saying he smokes and drinks and he eats too much McDonald's. You're emphasizing how unhealthy this person is. She may also be used to express a reason for something. For example, 雨が降っているし、傘を持っていく. Because it's raining, I'll bring an umbrella. The difference between this and using kara or node is that it's more casual. Also, this has more of a focus on the solution to the issue rather than the issue itself. So I'm putting more emphasis on the solution to the issue in this one, which is bringing an umbrella. And the issue is the rain. Shika is not a combination of shi and ka. It's its own distinct particle, which means just or only. 高いね。1000円札しかない. It's too expensive. I only have a 1,000 yen bill. Shika is always used with negative verbs. You will never see this with a positive verb. This can sound a little strange at first. Like if I say ここではお寿司しか売っていません. It can be translated as we only sell sushi here. From an English-speaking perspective, this can be hard to understand because 売っていません on its own translates to we don't sell. And this construct, it translates to we do sell because we have shika. Similar to shika, ばっかり also expresses limitation. It can be used with positive verbs and suggests that something might be excessive or happening continuously. たけし君はゲームばっかりしてる. Takeshi does nothing but play video games. Kedo and the conjunctive ga I'm gonna put together because they have similar meanings. Kedo is short for keredomo, which means but or though. 焼肉を食べ方けど、お腹が痛いんだった. I wanted to go to yakiniku, but my stomach was hurting. So let's cycle back to the beginning when I spoke about ga. There is a separate particle ga that is written the same, but it has a different meaning, similar to kedo. チーズが好きですが、クリームチーズはあまり好きじゃないです. I like cheese, but I don't really like cream cheese. Yori is translated as rather or more than, and it's used when comparing things. Takeshi wa watashi yori game wo suru. Takeshi plays more video games than me. Yori is very straightforward, easy particle, so that's all I really need to say about it. The final particles that I'm going to go over are interjectory particles, and there are a handful of them. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I'm going to go over the most common ones. Interjectory particles add some sort of extra meaning onto clauses or sentences. The most common interjectory particles are sa, yo, and ne. Yo, I'm going to go over first. This one makes something more informative. Like if you're bringing attention to something that you or the listener wasn't or isn't aware of. If my friend drops his wallet and I pick it up for him, I could say, Seifu wa otoshita yo. You drop your wallet. You can also use this to put emphasis on something that is especially so. Say my friend and I walk into a library and we realize that it's especially quiet. It's more quiet than it usually is. I could say, 図書館静かだよ. Wow, the library is really quiet today. Kind of, that's what it means. Ne is used when you think the listener will agree with you and can roughly be translated as, isn't it? Like if a friend and I are walking outside and it's hot, I could say, 暑いね, which means it's hot, isn't it? It can also be used by itself to get someone's attention. Ne, ここに来て. Hey, come here. This should be used in casual situations. If you're trying to be formal, don't use this. Use sumimasen to get someone's attention. Sa can mean different things depending on the gender of the speaker. For men, it can be a slightly softer version of yo, like when speaking about obvious facts. For women, it's used like ne, but they sometimes put it in sentences to fill up space, similar to how English we put like and Also, women typically pronounce it with a longer vowel, like they'll say sa instead of sa. Remember the particle no? Well, if you put it at the end of a sentence, it can turn it into a strong command. This is different from the no that is used to turn things into questions. This is introductory no. It's not the question no. Say I'm a teacher and my students are talking in class and they shouldn't be talking in class. So I say to them, 授業中はおしゃべりしないよ, which roughly translates to, you shouldn't chat in class. This no can't really be used for commands. It's used for things that someone should or shouldn't do, and they kind of know they should or shouldn't do it. That's why I use the classroom example, because the students know they shouldn't be chatting during class, but the teacher is sort of emphasizing that, saying you shouldn't chat in class. And it's kind of a way of telling the students to stop talking, but it's a, I guess, more roundabout, indirect way. Ze and zo are the final particles I'm going to be talking about in this video. These are both rough, informal, masculine forms of yo. They have the same functionality as yo, but they're used by close male friends. Say me and a buddy of mine are sitting at home, alone, bored on a Friday night. I might say to him, 一緒に居酒屋に行くぞ, which means, let's go to the izakaya. This sort of puts emphasis on it. Like, my friend is kind of hesitating about it, but I put zo at the end to sort of nudge him a little bit. Dude, come on, let's go. Stop being a wuss. Ze is an even less formal version of zo. And ze can sound kind of rude and a bit harsher. Once again, do not use zo or ze in formal contexts. If you say this to your boss, you're gonna get in trouble. And that will be it for my list of the most common Japanese particles explained in depth. I hope you enjoyed. If there's anything you think that I got wrong or incorrect, leave it in the comments below. I'd like to give a massive shout out to Jozu Jules for fact checking this script. He makes these really thorough videos about immersion and how to actually learn Japanese effectively. The guy's kind of a freak of nature, to be honest, and I mean that in the best way possible. I think he's at like N1 level of Japanese and he learned it in like 2 years. Absolutely insane. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support me directly, the best way to do it is through Patreon. I have 2 tiers, a $1 tier, which gets you a shout out at the end of my videos, and a $4 tier, which gets you a shout out at the end of my videos, and you'll get to see my videos 24 hours early, exclusively on Patreon. For the $1 tier, I'd like to shout out Claire Schmidt, Crashington, Jake Marr, Kevin Garcia, Enmitz the Fish, Running from Requiem, and Sir Boromir. For the $4 patrons, massive thanks to Amin Shin, Anthony, Boaxer, Fake Gamer Guy, and TW. Make sure to join my Discord server. We have a great community there. I'm active on my Discord server every day, and this is the best way to get in contact with me. Link will be in the description below. And I'd also like to give a big thanks to all of you lovely viewers. We hit 5,000 subscribers recently. I'm on the road to 6,000, and it's absolutely incredible. My goal is to get to 10,000 subs by the end of the year, so if you enjoyed this, subscribe. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and goodbye.